Hey everybody. AMC. Can you see us yet? Chrysalis. AMC. Can we see us? Yes. Can you hear me? Comment. I can hear you. We're here. Okay. Hello everyone. Thank you for your patience. We really appreciate it. We're trying to figure this thing out. We are in Chrysalis. And you are watching right now. We're in our online living room session. Welcome to our living room. Come sit down, get some tea, enjoy. So today we are talking about 3 possible futures for AMC, and we're gonna get your feedback on it. We're gonna talk about it a little bit more. But first we need to figure out where we came from to get to where we're going. So we're in Chrysalis. You know the metaphor. When a caterpillar tries to become a butterfly, it has to go into Chrysalis and do all of the work internally to become everything it needs to be. So we are here with...
Hello, Jenny Lee, Executive Director of Allied Media Projects. Welcome everyone. Thanks for your patience.
And I'm Nadine, the Content Coordinator for the Allied Media Conference.
Okay, so I plan my summer around AMC. I'm super excited about it every year. I'm so pumped, especially since I live a couple blocks away. I can just take naps during the conference. Very lucky. But this summer it's not happening. And I'm But then I also heard something else was happening that's even more hopeful and even more intentional. So I'm curious, what is happening right now? Why are we here? Why are we doing this?
Sure. Can we talk a little bit about what led us here?
Yeah, so we're here, as RV said, in this Chrysalis moment. I think what led us to this place is following last year's AMC, which was the 20th annual Allied Media Conference. We were so overwhelmed by the power of that event, the beauty of it, and also the sheer magnitude of it. And, we were, just to be honest, pretty destroyed by it, I would say. And really asking ourselves, what would it take to make this, the process of organizing this thing, the structure, the design of it, something that was sustainable for another 20 years. Because we really felt like just to continue growing at the rate of growth and the pace and the demand for growth that we'd been feeling would really burn us out.
Yeah, for sure.
So we started asking ourselves, well, maybe the AMC should be this or that next year. And then had a really revelatory moment working with a consultant that we love and have worked with for a long time, where she was like, you could just take a break.
Yeah, and it became that simple. And I think that when we made that decision to take a break, we made it thinking all kinds of things. We were like, well, will people still be with us? We asked ourselves a lot of questions. And I think the thing that is really powerful is just realizing that we wanted to grow with intention and not be controlled by growth, which led us to the year in Chrysalis. And the year in Chrysalis started with us gathering information and data about the AMC. In order for us to take a look at where we had been to know where we could go, we needed to know sort of the body of the conference, right?
The goo.
The goo, right? So we
had
a
to caterpillar, really.
Before
it became the goo.
Before we became
metaphors?
Yeah, so that led us to the state of the caterpillar report, right? So we were hungry, we're the hungry caterpillar, we're taking in all of the information, looking at all of the data to create this report that kind of served as the foundation to understanding more about the conference, asking ourselves what gifts does the AMC give to the world, and then also understanding what things we could expand upon, what things were challenging, and how we could get better. And in order to do that work, we brought on 10 AMCers with us to form the Chrysalis creative team.
Yeah, lots of different backgrounds too,
Lots of different backgrounds, right? So we have a lot of media-based organizers who have come to the AMC to do this work, have been anything from a track coordinator to a volunteer to bringing just really innovative content every year to the conference. And we thought, hey, the conference has always been a participatory design process. Let's bring folks in to like help us with this visioning.
Yeah.
So those 10 folks became the Chrysalis creative team. And in February, we came together for a retreat just to re-envision the conference, to ask ourselves new questions, and to really just say, what if? Which is leading us to this moment of scenarios.
So now we're in goo.
Now we're in
Now
goo.
it's really gooey.
Now it's really gooey.
Yeah.
We like to say, during the Chrysalis retreat, we were saying, what's goo?
What's goo?
What's
What's
goo?
goo? And really, the answer is everything.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so wait, if you're really interested about these 3 scenarios, comment what's goo. Okay? So the main structure of this, we have 3 major scenarios coming from the retreat that we talked about, yeah?
For sure. Yeah.
And so keep in mind these scenarios are very early versions. We're here to think about our next most elegant form of AMC and what that looks like. We're not going to have all of the answers, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the point of gathering everyone in our virtual living room today. It's just to gather what those big questions are, to gather those ideas, hear your feedback on it, so that when we go back into, as we continue to be goo, we can come away with our next most elegant form.
So in terms of feedback, we're going to go through each scenario, and then we're going to be gathering your comments and your questions. And then I'm going to get a text message of some of your questions, and then we're going to do our best. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about the scenario, then we're going to go through questions. Also, if you have other feedback that you'd like to be more wordy with, you can email amc@alliedmedia.org, amc@alliedmedia.org, and we'll get to you after. So let's get to these scenarios. Scenario 1, what's goo? Oh,
Before we even get there,
okay, okay.
just to back it up a little, because we do need to frame the scenarios in a couple ways first.
Okay.
And that is that, when we did this retreat, Nadine was talking about with the Chrysalis creative team, it was this like big blue sky, what if, all the possibilities. And we grounded it first, though, in asking, like, what's really essential about the AMC? Like, what are the core parts that, though everything feels up in the air, we know that it will contain this type of, there will be an antenna and a wing and a eyeball or whatever, the different parts of the butterfly. So from that, the pieces that we boiled down is this sort of set of commitments that across any scenario, these are going to be, the AMC is going to continue to do these things. One, advancing AMP's mission, which some folks may have seen. That mission got a little, an upgrade recently. We squeezed some lemon on it. It wasn't a total reinvention, but we refreshed it. And that is our mission to cultivate media for liberation. The other thing the AMC will continue to do is prioritize deep care and accessibility. We'll provide entry points for new people, especially Detroiters. So, we're balancing this tension between growth and intimacy, but we know that we can't just close the doors, that's not a solution to the challenges of growth. There will remain entry points for new people who are constantly coming into this work of media for liberation. We're going to ensure that the AMC continues to strengthen connectivity across networks. The AMC is a network of networks, and that's one of the most beautiful things about it. We'll continue to center marginalized communities and leadership of marginalized communities. We will take celebrations seriously, very seriously. Not just like continuing to party and throw down in all the ways, but expanding the ways that we celebrate to be more intergenerational, more inclusive of all the different ways that we find joy. And we're committing for the AMC to be evolving year after year or cycle after cycle through continued reflection and evaluation. So even once the Chrysalis year is done, the reflecting doesn't stop there. We're building it into the future. And then last but not least, we know the AMC is going to remain this place where we get to attempt to model the world in which we want to live.
For sure. And even to follow that up, I think that before we get into scenarios, it feels really important to talk about some main components that are a part of each scenario. Because through the feedback that we get, we take very seriously, right? So that we know that our network and our community is really calling for us to think about things or take things to the next level. So in a lot of these scenarios, or each scenario, there's going to be an expanded virtual component, right? So an expanded virtual component looks like, how do we gather folks online, right? What content can we offer online? And how do we host events that are also like virtual online presence? There's a little bit of a reorganization with the programmatic focus of the conference, where we definitely explore media for liberation, but also an additional piece of visionary organizing. And we explain like visionary organizing to be an exploration of like tools, methods, theories for the practical and visionary tools that we need for our movements to thrive. So that feels really important to say. There's also a little bit of a shift that people will hear, and that's the conference moving to a biannual focus in Detroit. Right? I know.
Okay. I'm listening.
Okay. And then also each scenario, a common component in each scenario is an expanded AMC at night. So we're thinking a lot about like, what does it look like to expand the programming for AMC at night, and how do we really lean into AMC at night being that point of connection for so many folks, you know? Also, every scenario, please keep in mind, there will definitely be a healing justice space, kid-centric programming, and opportunities to engage in hands-on media making.
Yes. Clapping hands emoji. I'm so ready. But also, you with the Chrysalis team, these scenarios will be this is not the only touch point, this online moment right now that we're having. The Chrysalis team is also involved in this, right? Of
course, yeah. The Chrysalis creative team is also hosting small, intimate gatherings called living room sessions as well.
Yeah.
Some of which may be in actual physical living rooms.
Some actually will be in actual living rooms, and some will be taking place virtually. And we'll be releasing more information about just the types of living room conversations that are going to be happening.
Yeah, I remember meeting a person over. Their focus was on like language decentralization.
Yeah.
Some was on disability
Disability
access.
justice, yeah.
And that's going to be so cool to see, to bring in that community and figure out how that fits.
And I think it's just really important for us to understand the feedback that we're getting from different angles, right?
Yes.
From a range of media-based organizers and from a range of just folks that are engaged in like multiple communities.
Totally. All right, we're ready to go to the scenarios?
Let's do it.
Okay, here's the tea. We're going to go through the scenarios, and then we are ready for your comments. You could comment them during, and I will be getting text messages of your questions. We will handle them scenario by scenario. So, scenario 1, what's goo?
Scenario 1 can best be framed as a biannual conference with the addition of an AMC fellowship.
Oh.
That's the summary of it, right?
Okay.
But if we get a little bit deeper into it, the AMC would convene 3,000 people biannually in Detroit. Our major content areas for this kind of conference would be network gatherings, media creation for liberation, and visionary organizing. And of course, AMC at night still happens.
Okay.
This is a slightly smaller AMC, and the reason why we sort of put a number on it was to think about accessibility and space and what that looks like. So with the content areas, we are estimating that we would take 25 network gatherings. And instead of network gatherings actually happening on one day, they would be expanded to 2 days.
Ooh.
So you would get a 2-day mini conference to dive deep into the work that you need to do with your networks, which feels really important in that.
Right. That's really beautiful because the critical connections is what really makes AMC magical. It's the people that you meet.
Absolutely.
And
We've
those
always
network
said
gatherings.
that. Yeah. We've always said that the conference is about like critical connections, not critical mass. So like how do we hone in on that? And I think a 2-day network gathering gives us the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Also, in sort of like the two kind of content umbrellas of media creation for liberation and visionary organizing, we would take a total of 10 tracks that will be proposed. Those 10 tracks would have we would have 20 sessions within those tracks. And there will still be a general track. And the general track would then hold big content, so plenaries, trainings, daytime events. the idea too is that the AMC fellows, which I'll get into a little bit later, would contribute to the content of the conference.
Okay.
Also, virtual component, we will offer plenaries, keynotes, selected sessions, and also have some online only content.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
so I think that could be really cool. A little bit about this media-based organizing fellowship is what we're sort of dreaming up is that we will host a fellowship that will host up to 5 groups and support them in developing their media-based organizing practice, sharpening their skills, their visions, projects, and or campaigns. And then the fellows would return in the conference year and produce content for the conference. So we would gather these fellows in the year that the conference is not happening, do those like in-depth trainings, build those critical connections, and then they would then propose content for the conference.
So that would kind of just feed into itself.
Yeah,
Nice.
AMC at night, I talked about an expanded AMC at night. And we're dreaming a couple things. So when we say an expanded AMC at night, and we're thinking about like more points of connection, more content, we're thinking that these events could look like more musical engagements.
Yes.
But also films,
Oh.
intimate community gatherings, virtual parties, which could be really cool.
And something we've been dreaming of for many years.
Yeah. So like a virtual party
Holograms
would be amazing. Craft talks that could take place in the city, and also just like tours.
Yeah.
So maybe you do go to a tour during daytime content, but then also there are some tours that are offered at night.
It's kind of like an AMC festival.
Yes.
Yes. What I love about the expanded AMC at night is that it seems like there's even more for everybody.
Yeah.
Because some people don't like to like go out and like dance or whatever. Some people like more intimate gatherings, and this gives a lot of space for that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
What are y'all thinking about scenario 1 so far? Get your thoughts in. I'm going to get a text message of some of your questions, and we'll go through it after we finish scenario 1 explanations.
Yeah, that's pretty much scenario 1.
Okay.
You know, just to recap, it's a biannual gathering, slightly smaller to accommodate just like physical accessible space.
Yeah.
In the off year, we gather a group of 5 fellows. And yeah, we deepen the work of media-based organizing in that fellowship, and then we return to the conference with that content.
Cool. Let's check some questions. We're going to get some questions in just a little bit. If you're just like into it, just comment like yes, scenario 1.
I guess more to say about that, it seems like, you know, that scenario really gives us the opportunity to be almost like kind of what we've been doing in this period, where like we have this chrysalis team that's like a smaller subset, like reflective of the many different parts of the AMC community, and we're building with them in this in-depth way over the course of this year. And so being able to do that with with just the media makers, media-based organizers across the vast AMC terrain, and then also kind of like it also for me feels a little bit like an expanded version of the way the track coordinating process has functioned. Absolutely. Right? So in the past, that usually is a 6-month really intense period where coordinators are like developing content for the AMC, and so this is also like that, but more spacious, like a whole year.
I think the thing that I'm really interested in with scenario 1 and it being a biannual conference, and also looking at expanding AMC at night, is that we have the opportunity to deepen relationships in the organizing cycle of the conference.
Yeah.
So I think it allows us to be more in tune to like different work that's happening, like specifically in Detroit, and then also just like around the country.
Yeah.
So I think that like it gives us some breathing room in terms of like the organizing cycle, and I think it might be a little bit more sustainable for folks that have to organize it.
Yeah. Yeah, because in the past it's been just it's been really intense, hasn't it? It's been, especially last year, it just got to a point where it was really hard to manage. It affected the accessibility for people within the conference.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And I know people might hear like we're going to limit the number to X, whatever number, to say we're going to limit it at all, and feel some kind of way about that. And I think it's going to remain a challenge for us that even if we're saying in this next, again, this is just scenario one, but if there's a scenario in which we cap the numbers, that it's not to say that number might not grow and expand over time as we gain access to more venues, in the perimeter of Wayne State, and think about ways that we can hold more people while still providing that access, safety, being responsibly, keeping people.
Right. So you mentioned Wayne State. Is that something that would be set in this scenario, or is that still something that's in GOO?
I suppose it's up in the air, but I think as we think through like Cobo Hall, the Marriott, those are all nightmare situations in terms of potential locations.
Yeah, for sure. I just think that like one of the things that we're also being conscious of is like, how do we honor where we are? How do we honor Detroit, right? And how do we also prioritize and also like acknowledge and I don't know, let AMCers experience like this city, right? So how do we like acknowledge the true culture of like Detroit? How do we remain conscious of the space and also infrastructure that's here? And so we don't want to create a pressure valve situation. Yeah. And that feels like really important to say. So I think that like expanding out, like offering conference content outside of the sort of like nucleus that we're in right now is possible. It's just about what that looks like and making those connections within our community.
Okay, so we have some comments. Love the fellowship idea to deepen the work that's happening. Really awesome. Love the fellowship idea. We have a question here. I'd love to hear y'all talk about the rationale behind the fellowship / the goals of the fellowship component.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I think that like the thing that feels really important is just like going back to the fact that this is an early kind of like version. So look at all of these scenarios as like a skeleton, right? So I think that if we explore the concept of having an AMC fellowship, we will then go deeper on what the goals of that fellowship will look like. Literally, like how many people or groups could we adequately hold? What those trainings look like. But I think right now it's just a little too early to have that fleshed out.
Yeah, and you've mentioned to expand the organizing skills of the fellows.
For sure, yeah.
And the fact is that the AMC, in the way that the track practice space network gathering kind of coordination process has been structured for the past like 7 years, that has been a leadership development process.
Yeah. For sure.
For a lot of people who might, coordinating an AMC track might have been their first kind of foray into organizing on a larger national scale. And then they go on to launch a whole network or a campaign or whatever from that experience. So I think it's also like growing out of our sense that the work of kind of envisioning and curating and convening content of the AMC is this leadership skill building experience for a lot of people, and how to deepen that, do it more intentionally, foster more relationship through kind of cohort models inside of something like a fellowship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Another question I got here was, how would you make it smaller? So like there's a huge demand of people wanting to participate in person at AMC. What do you, if this is a thing that we can, again, these scenarios are just very first draft. So like, is that a question we can answer right now? Like, what are some thoughts that go through, like, how could we make it? How do we scale it down?
Yeah, I think that question is a part of the GOO.
Yeah.
Right now. It's just, and we don't want to present anything or say anything that's going to be like not true, or like overcommit in these ways. I think that like when we put a number on something, we're just like envisioning like these are the folks that we would kind of like cap it at, or this is the number that we would kind of cap it out. How that capping would happen, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But we know we need to be balancing certain challenges in that. So one of them being that probably the 95% of everyone who does walk-up registration at the conference are people who live in Detroit.
Right.
So if we were to cap it, so we need to whatever the approach is, strike this balance where first come first serve doesn't exclude those people who typically do walk-up registration,
right.
or who don't necessarily have all the funds together to register until the last week. We know that even as we're 3,000 feels like a responsible number. We need to cap it at that. We're going to have to figure out ways around those challenges. And,
Absolutely. So yeah, it's hard to say because we definitely want to strike that balance.
Yeah, I think that's what I find value in this whole chrysalis process is being able to say we don't know.
Yeah.
And the bravery and the courage to say we're going to figure it out in public.
Yeah.
I think that's really vulnerable and wonderful for an organization. And it's definitely brought me to go through my own chrysalis in my life. And I think that's really inspiring.
Yeah.
All right. We have one more question here, and then we'll move on. Besides more amazing dancing, what are the goals for expanding the AMC at night?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the goals for expanding AMC at night is just to offer a range of content and for it not to just be this one specific thing that folks can do. In a lot of our feedback, people want the opportunity to do other things at night other than go to a party or dance. Some folks actually would like to see a film, right?
Yeah.
Or some folks would like to see more sober spaces, more kid-centric spaces. So expanding AMC at night allows us to tap into or to really, really understand all of the people that are coming to the conference and how can we create ways to celebrate that are, I don't know, just a range of experience. How can we create a range of experiences for folks?
Yeah.
And knowing that it's also, for a lot of people, their entry point into the daytime content. People were like, oh, I've been going to the parties for years, but I never went to a single workshop. Seeing that as an exciting opportunity to expand, if we are limiting the number of people who can be in the daytime workshop content, providing more opportunities for people to just be exposed and find that entry point into the conference.
Yeah, for sure.
Ooh, wow. Scenario one.
Scenario one.
Scenario one.
We still got two more.
We got two more. Okay, wait. Scenario one is basically, so all of these, okay. Scenario one is every other year, and in those years where it's not happening in Detroit, there's a fellowship program.
For sure.
So that's scenario one. Again, you can comment at any moment you'd like. If you have any more comments that you'd like to write an email out, you can email to amc@alliedmedia.org. And again, we're going to go through these scenarios. We have 3. We just went through the first one, and we're going to go through 2 more, and we're going to get some feedback from y'all, talk about it. Again, these scenarios are very first draft. We don't have the answers for everything. We're just presenting these potential shapes for AMC in the future. Whew, let's breathe out. Scenario one. Scenario one. Okay. Scenario two.
Okay.
Scenario
What's
two.
goo
What's goo?
with scenario two?
Let me tell you what's goo with scenario 2.
Okay.
Okay, so scenario 2 could be summed up by the biannual conference in Detroit plus regional gatherings in the off year. So what would that really look like? A lot of what we described about the AMC in Detroit for scenario 1 applies here. The difference is that it might be slightly smaller. And in the off years, we would be kind of opening up a call to our wider network, places where there's a lot of AMC momentum already, places where you have busloads and carloads of people coming to Detroit from already, to be able to host a kind of mini AMC in the June between when the Detroit conference would be happening. It would, you know, it's something that's been kind of percolating for a number of years of people saying, oh, I wish, you know, like all these folks in whatever, Toronto or Chicago or Atlanta, like I connect with them so deeply in Detroit, and then, you know, we go home and I just want more and more of that. So it would be a way to kind of build upon that momentum. It would also leverage a lot of the tools that we've been creating over the years inside of the AMC, of whether like the how we organize the AMC zine, the presenter guidelines, just kind of this would push us to create more and more of that documentation for how you do it yourself in your own place. And we would be committed to providing those kind of tools as well as some financial support. Not sure exactly how, you know, that would look. Putting budgetary numbers to all these scenarios is like a next phase.
Yes.
But also, you know, training, bringing folks together from those locations that would be hosting these regional AMCs in Detroit for the kind of like in-depth training and skill sharing that we have been doing for the coordinators of the tracks and practice spaces and network gatherings. In the thinking around scenario 2 currently, we don't think we could support more than 3 of these mini AMCs in at least the first iteration of this, wanting to be realistic or reasonable with, you know, our capacity to really provide the support needed to help make these really strong. And we would also be looking for kind of an anchoring host organization in whichever place was you know, asking to bring the AMC or create an AMC there. Am I missing anything from scenario 2?
No.
That's
This one's
the
really,
gist of it.
it's
Yeah.
interesting with these, like the almost independently organized. Like, I think it's really awesome because they can bring resources to their community specifically, and they can really know. I think that's really awesome.
I think also the sort of gift with like regional AMCs, these like other like smaller AMCs, is that there's an emphasis on like hyper local media-based organizing that's happening. And how do you amplify that work and also celebrate those media-based organizers? And I think having regional AMCs allows that amplification of like local work that's happening.
Yeah. I'm curious what's difference between the Detroit conference in scenario 2 and the Detroit conference in scenario 1. Is there much of a difference?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I think the common components that Nadine laid out in the beginning would be true in that, you know, the Detroit conference would continue to, you know, have an expanded virtual component, expanded AMC at night, the kind of twin themes of media for liberation and visionary organizing, that would remain the same. But primarily the difference is what happens in the off year.
I see, okay.
Also, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong about like scenario 2, but I think in scenario 2, we propose that there are no network gatherings and 250 sessions.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that might be goo?
It's all good.
It's all good.
It's all goo.
It's all good.
It's all
But yeah,
goo.
taking the network gatherings out of that scenario
Okay.
and having a smaller number of workshops.
Some thoughts to ponder.
Just
Yeah.
a thought.
Just
Yeah.
a thought. So, let's see. We're looking here. Okay. No? Okay, well, if you're into scenario 2, just comment yes, scenario 2. We're waiting for your input. I wish like I could zoom into my face right now.
The notorious
Next
RV
level.
Zoom.
Live stream
The
production.
zoom. Wow, scenario 2 is also like, it's just a different shape of AMC. It's a
Yeah.
possibility of what could be.
And I think the thing that's really exciting is to like get feedback from folks and understand what they're excited about.
Yeah.
So that we can go back and, you know, continue to be
Massage
good.
and build. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we got a question?
All right, we got a question here. Shazam! What kind of support would the core AMC team be providing versus the local organizer? So what is AMC from here coming to provide the locally organized AMC?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different versions of what this scenario could look like, actually. So there's one scenario in which it's a really small number of places that we support in hosting the mini AMCs. And in that scenario, maybe there's a lot of support, right? So like more funding, more hands-on like training, and while still relying on pretty solid organizational infrastructure in that place, and a host organization that's like, we want this, we want to lead it, we've got the bones and all of this stuff, and our staff would then be providing kind of like some adornment to the like solid foundation in that place. There's another scenario in which we'd be, if we wanted to say, really like throw open the doors, like come one, come all, whoever wants to propose to host a thing, then that might be a much more far removed, like what we can provide is tools and promotion for your thing. We're going to ask you to subscribe to these shared principles or methods or whatever, like some ways to ensure alignment, but really just kind of have it be an open invitation. And in that scenario, you might have, say you might have like 20 people who say, I want to do a mini AMC in my town or my city or my place, but some of those gatherings might be like 50 people. Or 25 people, or 3,000 people, whatever, it would be more based on the kind of capacity and momentum in each of those places, more so than on our, resources.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, if this scenario were to play out, it'd be kind of like a team of people from an area would be like, hey, AMC, we want to do this. And that really depends on the scale of how much we can help and what that would look like in the future.
And then also like the potential for the regional gatherings to contribute to content for the larger gathering in Detroit feels really important. So then we're already this network, but what we're doing is creating this hub for like an exchange to happen across regions, across cities, across projects. And I think that what you get is just like content that's like really rounded out, that's really representative of like different places. And yeah, folks can come together to deepen their skills and learn a lot more.
All right. Any other feedback we got? All right. That's scenario 2, which is what's like the sum up of scenario 2?
Detroit plus lots of other places.
Okay, Detroit plus lots of other places. We have 3 scenarios. We have biannual Detroit fellowship, and then the second one is biannual Detroit plus other places.
Yep.
All right. Scenario 2, breathing it on. Okay. Scenario 3.
Scenario 3. This is a side note.
Okay.
But what I love about the breathing
Yes.
is that if anyone has listened to LeVar Burton's podcast,
Okay.
Yes.
before every story, he says, let's take a deep breath. And he's like, that's good.
Ooh, that's good.
All right, on to
that's
scenario.
good. I like that.
On to scenario 3. So scenario 3 can be best described as like Detroit and a new place.
Okay.
So you'll kind of hear two things, right? There will be a distinction between like AMC Detroit and AMC in a new place.
Okay.
But in this scenario, the AMC team will cultivate a 3-year sort of like plan of engagement with one new place.
Okay.
And the Detroit conference would convene participants to still explore media creation for liberation and like visionary organizing. We'll have like, I think there's a smaller number of sessions at like maybe like 150 or so, with 50% of that content being Detroit based. And again, this is just the Detroit conference with like 10-day-long network gatherings. The new place, really like the idea is to like deepen relationships with like grassroots organizations and organizers in the selected host city. So instead of having this model where we're sort of rotating between a different city every time, in this model, we're just like making a commitment to work with this organization or these organizers and producing what will end up being 3 AMCs. And basically it will be up to that new place, right? So if that new place is saying, yes, we are absolutely capping registration for some reason, right? That's on the organizers of that place. And what we would be doing is training, completely supporting the organizers of this conference, which is still an AMC. And yeah, that's pretty much the base of scenario 3. And still like all of the other things stand, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like content, AMC at night, all of those things are still part of it.
Yeah.
And our thinking is that it would be a place that has some sort of like sibling type relationship to Detroit.
Yeah.
Like shared kind of context. And I mean, in our dream scenario, it would be a warm weather place.
Yeah. Yes.
And that it would be, you know, we've conceived of it as not necessarily biannual so much as like every 18 months would allow for that. So you might have Detroit in June, other place in winter of not that coming winter, but like 18 months later in that warm place. Then back in Detroit, another 18 months after that, back in the other place 18 months from there.
Yep.
So committing to whatever that other place would be for 3 of those cycles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that sort of like term of like years of engagement, you get 3 AMCs that happen in Detroit, 3 AMCs that happen in another place, like on an 18-month cycle.
Wow.
So the AMC every 18 months.
Okay. I mean, we're looking for feedback in the comments. We will be answering some questions that y'all have. Let's see. So one of the things I'm thinking about is it feels like there's a default that if you're making something, the end is you just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's like the default. And I'm noticing a lot of these scenarios have thoughtfully like minded the space that they fill. Like it doesn't, the default doesn't have to be just make registration as big as possible. Just expand this.
Right.
I'm curious, like, what was the thought process to potentially scale down a little bit?
Can you speak a little to that?
I gotta say there were versions of scenarios in which we were like
10,000
not
people.
shrink. You know, like there was a version that we were calling the mothership that was like 10,000 people that would happen like every 4 years. And I guess it's to say it's not, you know, none of these scenarios are foreclosing the possibility that in the future we would continue to grow to have more, you know, capacity for more. But I think it's the reluctance to just kind of running full speed towards the like maximal vision is, I think, one, limitations on the physical landscape we're working with here in Detroit.
Yeah.
Because for us to say, well, the next move would be Cobo Hall, which is where the Detroit International Auto Show happens, which is also incidentally moving to June from winter, which presents its own set of challenges.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, it's like we can't really fathom of the AMC inside of that physical place.
Yeah.
There's the Renaissance Center, which is also not ever really going to be able to provide a home to the AMC. So it's, you know, what we have when we don't limit, you know, or kind of set some sort of boundaries, parameters on the numbers of people and continue to hold the conference inside of Wayne State's, you know, context, is that we have these like, you know, massively overflowing sessions and people who are, you know, have, you know, slower mobility, getting there, not being able to get in, or like fire hazards for people, you know, and it's just all of those concerns. And so that really informed a lot of it, but also just this, I think, growing sense of people who, for whom the AMC has been this very transformational experience year after year, that something was being lost in the kind of like, the wave of growth.
And I think that, like, you know, if the AMC becomes this really big thing, then we then have to ask ourselves, how do we create intimacy still?
Yeah.
What ways do we still allow for critical connections to be made? And like Jenny is saying, how do we honor the space that we're like actually in? So I wouldn't necessarily say that like in some future it's off the table, but I think that we would have to ask ourselves a lot of questions about how intentional we can be with that many people, you know?
Yeah.
And also, what does it take staffing wise to be able to host a bigger conference?
Yeah.
I think also there's just increasingly this question of safety.
Safety.
You know,
Absolutely.
on all these different levels, like the emotional safety, the physical safety, the like, I think because the AMC has been designed in such a way where the expectations of the kind of safety, the kind of ways in which people will be held are so high, that they're like, the implications of how you continue to provide that kind of safety on larger scales is really different than, say, you know, like I think people who go to South by Southwest have one expectation for what they're going to experience, and it's like not the same as what, you know, people bring in terms of needing that kind of space to the AMC.
Absolutely.
So we have some comments here. I really like scenario 3. So how are we going to summarize scenario 3?
Scenario 3 is the AMC happens every 18 months.
Okay.
But it happens in Detroit and in a new place.
So, in summary, scenario 1 is
biannual conference in Detroit with an AMC fellowship.
Okay, what's scenario 2?
Biannual conference in Detroit plus mini AMC regional gatherings in the off year.
Okay, and then scenario 3
is the AMC happens every 18 months, happens in Detroit and in a new place.
Alternating back and forth.
So this person says, I really like scenario 3. For both number 2 and 3, I wonder what your concerns are about shifting geography away from Detroit, if any.
I mean, lots of concerns, honestly, when it comes to like the general track record of conferences descending upon places. It's been a 12-year struggle to really attempt to root the AMC and make it like relevant and useful to Detroit and owned by Detroit and all these things. And it's like, so the prospect of having it happen in another place is daunting in that regard of like how to build how to not replicate the problem of conferences that move from place to place and be really in deep relationship with the place.
Which I think is like the unique thing with scenario 3 is what does it look like to have it in another place, but also understand the deep relationship building that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think the thing that makes AMC in Detroit so, so great, right, is that there are local organizers here that are also doing the work, right? And that comes from years of relationship building.
Yeah.
That's years of building with folks. That's years of people attending the conference. That's years of people giving feedback and also offering the solution.
Yeah.
And I think that like in order to be really intentional with going to a new place, it requires that deep relationship building. And I think that's the sort of thing that scenario 3 offers.
So I'm getting some questions about network gatherings. So let's go through the network gatherings, what it is first, and then like how network gatherings will happen within each scenario. So for those that don't know what a network gathering is, how would you explain a network gathering?
Yeah, so a network gathering is just like a closed space where networks have the opportunity to do like really deep just like deep work together. So that deep work together could be like planning, strategizing, oftentimes launching new projects, or it could look like folks from a shared identity coming together and like having sort of like a mini conference throughout the day.
Okay.
Usually or in our past shape, network gatherings happened on the first day of the conference, and they were just day-long gatherings.
Okay. So, so for example, like I'm Filipinx, there would be like for an example, there'd be like a Filipinx network gathering. I would meet other people that identify with that, and then we would just talk about things.
Yeah.
But with some shared focus also around media-based organizing.
Okay.
So it would be like Filipinx drag queens using media for liberation.
Okay, word.
And
I would
network
go to
gatherings
that.
are always proposed by folks, AMCers.
Okay.
So like, we're not the powers that be that says, there's a network gathering on this and this and this.
Okay.
Right.
Network gatherings are proposed.
Okay, so let's talk about network gatherings in terms of the different scenarios. And again, the scenarios are still first draft. Things can be very different from now. But let's talk about network gatherings in context of scenario 1.
Scenario 1 network gatherings, we sort of said there will be like this ominous number of 25.
Plethora.
25 network gatherings. And instead of them being a day long mini conference, they are 2 days.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then we have scenario 2.
In scenario 2, there are no network gatherings. But I don't know that, I'm not totally sure why. But
That's good.
Yes.
In scenario 3, there are like 10 network gatherings, but this is specific to the Detroit conference because the sort of new place will be able to set their own sort of like terms for content. But there will be like 10 day-long network gatherings.
10?
10.
10 days?
No, 10 network gatherings
Oh,
that
okay.
are day long.
Okay.
Yeah. 10 days.
I was like, what?
Yeah. I don't even know if it could
Okay,
be with
work.
same
Okay,
people for
clarify
10
again.
days.
That's 10 network gatherings.
10 network gatherings,
Okay.
which will only be a day long.
Got it.
So remember, in scenario 1, the network gatherings are 2 days long.
Okay. Because one of the questions were, I think you referenced a 10-day network gathering for scenario 3.
No, sorry.
That's 10 network
10 network gatherings
Single day.
that
In
are
one-
day.
Okay. And to clarify scenario 3, someone's asking the time frame for scenario 3. So it's Detroit plus one other place
Every 18 months.
every 18 months.
So picture like Detroit, June 2020. Cycle around
Winter
to January 2022.
There you go.
Okay.
Then the next one comes back around to Detroit in June 2023, and then it would come back to the other place in 2025.
There you go.
Yep.
We got a question about, so what is the thinking behind changing the number of network gatherings? Like, do they bring more people or they make it easier to limit numbers? Like, what's the thought process with that?
I think the thing that we're proposing, like I said, with any of these numbers, is just like, what is the thing that's different than what it is, than what it's been? And I think with each of the numbers, we're thinking about a smaller conference versus like a larger conference. So in scenario 3, the Detroit conference is smaller. So hence sort of like smaller amounts of content
Yeah.
for those folks. Yeah.
All right. So we have another question here. I'll just read it verbatim. Would love to hear more at some point about how the emotional support offering that was provided during the last conference fits into the different scenarios.
Absolutely. So in the earlier framing of, before we got into the scenarios, one of the things that we mentioned was that each of these scenarios, there are like components that are essential to each of these scenarios. So as you kind of listen to these scenarios, these like components should be assumed, I guess. And one of those things is that healing justice is still a space that we have at this conference.
We didn't name it, but safety team as well.
Right.
These kind of core components that have defined the experience for people would continue.
Absolutely continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, so safety team is an interesting example of a kind of function that grew inside of the AMC to meet a really specific need, has blossomed into a year-round initiative here in Detroit, Detroit Safety Team, that's supporting, you know, emotional safety, transformative justice work for lots of different spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have any other comments, definitely continue to comment below. If you'd like to email us your comment, you can email us at amc@alliedmedia.org. That's amc@alliedmedia.org. So I'm curious with these three scenarios, we're wrapping up here.
Yeah.
With these three scenarios, how is it going to get chosen? Like, what is that process going to look like from here?
We really want folks' feedback on, you know, even not just like taking them whole in their entirety, but saying, I like this about this one, I like this about the other one, you know, letting us know which pieces resonate. We're going to be relying a lot on the Chrysalis creative team. There's another entity, which we didn't mention, that's in this process, which is called the Wise Council.
Ooh.
Yes. And it's notable. It's like the Chrysalis creative team is people with a mix of longevity in terms of their experience at the AMC, but it's primarily newer people. The Wise Council is a sort of like parallel entity that's also helping us think through these different scenarios and comprised of people who've been involved for 10 or more years, lending that perspective alongside this kind of newer energy. But yeah, we'll be stirring all of these perspectives in a cauldron and making a decision.
Yeah, we'll be taking everyone's like big questions that they have, everyone's like ideas that they have, all of the feedback that we gather through these listening sessions that are happening, called the Living Room series.
Yeah.
We'll really be taking all of that feedback, going back into a retreat, hopefully next month, right? And we'll be looking at all of the different pieces that we received, and then coming away and saying, okay, we are certain that this is where we start building from.
You mentioned the living room sessions. Just for those who are just joining in, can you tell us? So this is a living room session, but it's online.
Yeah, this is a virtual.
So there are other living room sessions happening all around.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So the living room sessions are an opportunity for us to engage our community and to listen in regards to like what folks need from the conference, to get their feedback on these scenarios, and for there to be an opportunity for like AMCers to build together in like a intimate setting, talking about the AMC. Those sessions are being hosted by Chrysalis creative team members. So there are a few that are happening, or not a few actually.
10.
There are 10.
All around the nation.
All over the place, right? And we hope to release more information just with the descriptions of what's happening, who's being convened, hopefully like maybe next week.
Yeah. I have a clarifying question about scenario 2 and 3 from the comments. In between scenario 2 and 3 in Detroit, would it be smaller than scenario 1?
2 and 3?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So 2 and 3. What is 2 again? What's the summary?
Detroit biannual conference in Detroit plus regional mini AMCs in the off year.
Okay, and scenario 3 is
the AMC happens every 18 months and rotates between Detroit and a new place.
And so between scenario 1 and 2 and 3, it's what was the answer again?
Yeah, so the numbers are different, right?
Yeah.
Is the question about it being, is it smaller than scenario 1? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in scenario 3, I believe we said it was like 1,500 for the Detroit conference. And like I said, I want to reiterate that like the new place would be setting their own sort of like terms.
Oh, right.
With our support, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Ooh, so with these scenarios, like with people looking at this right now and then watching it back in the future, what kind of questions do you want them to think about and then even give us feedback on?
Yeah, for sure. Like, what feels challenging about the scenarios, right? Is like one thing that comes to mind. what are like the gifts or resources that these scenarios offer to your community specifically, to your media-based organizing practice specifically? Anything else you can like?
Yeah, I think just with this question about the size, particularly, you know, like ideas that people have for how we can continue to balance the intimacy and the kind of experience that has made the AMC so special with the growing demand and desire for more people to participate. And I think ideas for like this virtual component, because I think for us that's been a big source of possibility in terms of continuing to engage people, not having to limit the numbers, but not having to rely on fossil fuels as much for flying human bodies all over the place, to be together and not being limited by the physical limitations of our built environment here.
And also the virtual component, creating room for deeper accessibility, a commitment to deeper accessibility.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've there's a way in which the virtual version is the secondary or kind of shadow version to the real thing that's happening in person. But I think we really are excited to think with our community about how virtual space can be unique and powerful in and of itself. And so that's why this idea of online only content, like ways of interacting and skill sharing and relationship building that can only happen online because of the unique opportunities that
online gatherings.
Yeah.
Like
Instead of it just being like a second thought, it is like a truly unique experience,
Yes.
which creates even more accessibility.
Yes. Virtual reality, like, you know, building upon gaming cultures and like how so much is possible virtually with learning, with relationship building, all the things that are at the heart of AMC.
Absolutely.
That was like a real look into what's inside Chrysalis, and we're definitely still goo,
Yeah.
but we are becoming.
Absolutely.
We are becoming right in front of your eyes. And so, just to wrap everything up, we're going to go through the scenarios one more time, because it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And then we'll say goodbye.
Absolutely.
So, scenario 1.
Biannual conference in Detroit, with the possibility of an AMC fellowship.
Okay. Scenario 2.
Biannual conference in Detroit with mini AMCs taking place in other places in the off year.
Okay. And then the final scenario.
Scenario 3 is AMC in Detroit and a new place with the AMC happening every 18 months, rotating between Detroit and that new spot.
And then what's next after this?
What's next after this?
So there's the living room session, the non-virtual living room sessions that our Chrysalis creative team members are organizing around the country. There's going to be a retreat where we all come back together, digest the feedback, choose a path forward, and launch the new shape of the butterfly body in July.
In July.
All right.
And hopefully hearing from all of you all on the feedback that you have on these scenarios, emailing us at amc@alliedmedia.org with your ideas and your thoughts, and becoming that butterfly.
Yes. Thank you for joining us tonight. Of course, if you have any questions that weren't answered, again, you can email us at amc@alliedmedia.org. What's goo?
What is really goo?
What's goo? See y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Oh, did we? And thank you. We forgot
Oh, yeah.
to say
Absolutely.
thank yous if we're still there. Thank you to Kim, our communications director, staffing the info line. Thank you to Cast Corridor Films for the live streaming support. Thank you to Mo Man-Willis, who's been instrumental behind the scenes in this scenario crafting. And thank you, RV, for being our digital host, as always.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Until next time, what's goo? Dun, 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 ba-da-dun, dun, dun, ba-da-dun, dun, dun, dun,
Who
dun,
has
dun, dun.
some